Hey folks, I know I am just an old guy telling stories, but please leave a like and subscribe before we start. Let's enjoy in today's stories. Alright, so this all started about a year ago. I'm just an average guy, nothing special. I work a regular job, hang out with friends, and yeah, spend too much time on Reddit. But then something really weird happened, and it all began with my best friend, Mikey. Mikey's always been the thrill-seeker type. He's into extreme sports, urban exploring, all that kind of stuff. So, it wasn't too shocking when he started talking about the dark web. At first, I didn't take it seriously. I thought it was just another one of his crazy phases. He'd get obsessed with something for a while and then move on. But this time, it was different. We were chilling at his place one Friday night, having a few beers when he brought it up. "Hey man, have you ever checked out the dark web?" he asked, eyes gleaming with excitement. I laughed. "Yeah, isn't that where all the creeps and criminals hang out?" "Sort of," he said, leaning in closer. "But it's also a lot more than that. There's a whole hidden world out there. You can find stuff you wouldn't believe." I took another sip of my beer, curious but skeptical. "Like what?" Mikey's face lit up. "You can buy anything. Drugs, guns, fake IDs. But there's also some really creepy stuff. I found this forum where people share their darkest secrets, and another one with videos of urban legends that are supposed to be real. It's insane." I was intrigued but also a bit wary. "And you've been on there? Isn't it dangerous?" "Only if you're an idiot about it," he said with a grin. "You just need to know how to stay anonymous. I've been exploring it for a while now and nothing bad has happened to me." That's when I started to think maybe the dark web was more than just a scary story. Mikey showed me how to get on it safely, using Tor and a bunch of other security stuff. At first I was just curious, browsing around. But as the weeks went by, I got more and more into it. One night I was home alone, bored out of my mind, when I decided to do something really stupid. I was on one of those dark web marketplaces Mikey had told me about, and I saw this ad that caught my eye. "Rare USB stick for sale. Contains unique and mysterious content." The description was vague, but something about it made me curious. It was only $50, so I figured, why not? I clicked on the ad, and a few minutes later, I had bought it using Bitcoin. The seller promised discreet shipping, and a few days later the package arrived. The USB stick looked normal, just a plain black drive. I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting it to be a scam or full of viruses. But what I found was way worse. There was one folder on the stick called Memories. Inside there were dozens of photos and videos. I clicked on the first photo, and my heart almost stopped. It was a picture of me at a playground when I was about 5. I was wearing this red jacket with a dinosaur patch. I had this big smile, missing my front teeth. My hands started shaking as I looked through more photos. They were all of me, at different ages. Some were just normal, like me playing in the yard with my dog. But others were really creepy, photos of me sleeping, totally unaware. I quickly closed the folder, my mind racing. Who the hell took these photos? And why? I felt sick, like someone had been watching me my whole life. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence, that maybe it was someone else who looked like me. But I knew that wasn't true. Then, I made the mistake of opening one of the videos. It started with a grainy black and white image of my childhood bedroom. The camera was in the corner, pointed at my bed. I watched as a younger me, maybe 8 or 9, crawled into bed and fell asleep. The video went on forever, just me sleeping. Then the camera started moving. I realized someone was holding it. They walked slowly towards my bed, the image getting shakier. They stood over me, watching me sleep, then reached out and brushed my hair from my face. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding. I felt like I was going to throw up. Who had been in my room filming me while I slept? And how did they get these videos? I tried to calm down, telling myself it was a sick joke. Maybe Mikey was messing with me. But that didn't make sense. Mikey didn't have access to my childhood home, and he wouldn't have videos of me as a kid. I spent the rest of the night freaking out, checking the locks on my doors and windows, looking out into the dark to see if anyone was there. I didn't sleep at all, my mind racing with fear and questions. The next morning, I called Mikey. "Dude, you won't believe what I found," I said, my voice shaking. "What is it?" he asked, sounding worried. I told him everything, the photos, the videos, the feeling of being watched. There was a long silence on the other end. "Man, that's seriously messed up," he finally said. "You need to get rid of that USB stick. Burn it, smash it, just get rid of it." "I know," I whispered. "But I need to find out who did this. I need to know why." "Look, maybe it's better if you don't know," Mikey said. "Some things are better left alone." But I couldn't let it go. I had to know the truth, no matter how disturbing it was. Little did I know, my search for answers was just beginning, and it would take me down a path of horror I could never have imagined. After that call with Mikey, I was a mess. I spent the whole day trying to act normal, but inside I was freaking out. Every noise made me jump, and I kept checking over my shoulder like someone was following me. That night I couldn't stop thinking about those photos and videos. Who had taken them? Why did they have them? I knew I had to find out more. I decided to look through the USB stick again, hoping to find some kind of clue. I plugged it back in and opened the memories folder. This time I looked at the files more closely. Each photo and video had a timestamp, and I realized they were all taken on significant days in my life. Birthdays, holidays, even my first day of school. It felt like someone had been tracking me, documenting my life. The thought made my skin crawl, but I had to keep digging. I noticed a subfolder called Documents. Inside, there were files with my name on them, medical records, school reports, even some of my drawings from when I was a kid. It was like someone had been collecting every piece of information about me. One file stood out. It was a text document named Notes. I opened it, and what I read made my blood run cold. The notes were detailed observations about me, written in a way that made it clear the person knew me intimately. They mentioned things I had never told anyone, my fears, my favorite hiding spots, even conversations I had with my parents. I had to know who was behind this. I called Mikey again, desperate for his help. "Mikey, I found more stuff. Someone has been watching me my whole life. They know everything about me." "Jesus, man," Mikey said. "This is way beyond anything I've heard about on the dark web. You need to go to the police." "I can't," I said. "What if they think I'm crazy? Or worse, what if they don't believe me and this person finds out I went to the cops?" All right, Mikey said, trying to calm me down. "Let's think about this. There has to be a way to trace the USB stick. Maybe the seller left some kind of clue. Did you get any contact info when you bought it?" I checked my emails and found the transaction details. The seller's username was Watcher1987. There was no real contact info, just an encrypted email address. I felt a mix of fear and anger. This person had been invading my life, and now I had a lead, even if it was a small one. "Mikey, I found the seller's username, Watcher1987, but I don't know what to do with it." "All right, let me think," Mikey said. "Maybe we can find them on one of the forums. People like that always leave some kind of trail. Give me some time to dig around." While Mikey searched the forums, I decided to do some digging of my own. I couldn't just sit around and wait. I went through the notes again, looking for any hints about the Watcher's identity. One entry caught my eye. It mentioned a park I used to go to with my parents, a place we stopped visiting after my mom passed away. I hadn't been there in years, but something about the note felt off. It mentioned a specific tree where I used to hide my toys. I decided to check it out, hoping maybe there was something there, some clue the Watcher had left behind. The park was eerily quiet when I arrived. It felt strange being there after so many years. I made my way to the tree mentioned in the notes. I started digging around the base, feeling a bit ridiculous, but driven by a desperate need for answers. After a few minutes, my fingers hit something hard. I pulled out a small rusted metal box, My heart was pounding as I pried it open. Inside, there were more photos of me, along with a few small items: an old toy car, a bracelet my mom gave me, and a note. The note was written in the same handwriting as the document on the USB stick. "You're getting closer," it read. "But are you ready for the truth?" I felt a literal chills down my spine. This person was playing a game with me, and I had no choice but to play along. I took the box and hurried back to my car, my mind racing. I had more questions than answers, but I was determined to get to the bottom of this. When I got home, Mikey called me. "I found something," he said, his voice tense. "Watcher 1987 has been active on several forums. They've posted a lot of creepy stuff, but nothing that points directly to you. However, I found a thread where they hinted at meeting up with people. It's a long shot, but maybe we can track them down through one of their contacts." "Thanks, Mikey," I said, feeling a bit of hope. "Let's do it. I need to find this person and put an end to this." As we hung up, I realized this was just the beginning. I was diving into a dark world I knew nothing about, and the more I uncovered, the more dangerous it felt. But I couldn't stop now. I had to know the truth no matter the cost. Mikey and I spent the next few days diving deep into the dark web forums, trying to track down any leads connected to Watcher 1987. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, but we were determined. Every spare moment was spent scrolling through posts, chatting with sketchy users, and piecing together bits of information. One night, Mikey called me sounding excited. "I think I found something. There's this user, Nightstalker88, who seems to know Watcher 1987. They've exchanged messages in several threads about meeting up in person. It looks like they have some kind of connection. Do you think we can contact Nightstalker88? I asked, my heart pounding. "It's risky," Mikey said, "but it's our best shot at finding out more about Watcher 1987. I'll send a message and see if we get a response." We crafted a careful message, pretending to be interested in their creepy hobbies to avoid suspicion. Then we waited. It felt like an eternity, but after a couple of days, Nightstalker88 replied. "Who are you?" The message read. "Why do you want to meet?" Mikey and I had planned for this. We spun a story about being new to the dark web, fascinated by their posts, and eager to learn more. After some back and forth, Nightstalker88 agreed to meet us in a chat room at a specific time. When the time came, Mikey and I were ready. The chat room was dark, with only a few users present. Nightstalker88's username appeared and we started chatting. We kept it casual at first, talking about dark web stuff to build trust. Then we steered the conversation toward Watcher 1987. "So we heard you know Watcher 1987 pretty well," Mikey typed. "We've seen their posts, and they seem interesting." Nightstalker88's response was cautious. "Yeah, we go way back. What do you want with them?" I took a deep breath and typed, "We're curious about their projects. We've seen some of their work, and it's fascinating. We want to know more." There was a long pause. Finally, Nightstalker88 replied, "Watcher 1987 is different. They're into some really dark stuff. If you're serious about meeting them, you need to be careful." We assured Nightstalker88 that we were serious, and after more convincing, they agreed to set up a meeting. They gave us a location, an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, and a time to be there. The day of the meeting, Mikey and I were both nervous. We drove out to the location, an old rundown warehouse that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The place was creepy as hell, but we had come this far and we couldn't back out now. We parked a little distance away and walked to the building. The door was slightly ajar, and we slipped inside, our footsteps echoing in the empty space. We waited, every creak and rustle making us jumpy. After what felt like forever, we heard footsteps. A figure emerged from the shadows. They were wearing a hooded jacket, and their face was obscured. "You must be the new guys," they said in a low voice. "Yeah," Mikey replied. "Are you Nightstalker88? The figure nodded. "Follow me." We followed them deeper into the building, through a maze of hallways and rooms. Finally, we entered a room with a single chair and a small table. On the table was a laptop. The figure gestured for us to sit. "Watcher 1987 will be here soon," they said. "But first I need to know if you're really serious about this. Once you go down this path, there's no turning back." "We're serious," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to know what Watcher 1987 is all about." The figure nodded and stepped back, fading into the shadows. We sat in silence, waiting. After a few minutes, the laptop screen flickered to life. A face appeared on the screen, distorted and hidden by shadows. "Welcome," the distorted voice said. "I hear you're interested in my work." "Yes," Mikey said. "We want to know more about you." The figure on the screen chuckled. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing. But if you really want to know, I'll tell you. I've been watching you, both of you, and I've been waiting for this moment." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about the USB stick. This person knew us, had been following us. "Why?" I asked. "Why have you been watching us?" The figure leaned closer to the camera, their eyes piercing through the screen. "Because you are interesting. Because you are part of a larger experiment. And now you're in too deep to back out." The screen went black and the room plunged into darkness. Mikey and I sat there, stunned and terrified. We had stepped into a nightmare, and there was no waking up. The truth was out there, and it was darker and more twisted than we could have ever imagined. After that strange meeting, Mikey and I were both freaked out. We decided we had to dig deeper and find out who Watcher 1987 really was. We spent the next few days glued to our screens, searching through dark web forums and trying to find any clues. One night, Mikey called me, sounding excited. "Dude, I think I found something. There's this user, Nightstalker88, who seems to know Watcher 1987. They've talked about meeting up a few times. Do you think we can contact Nightstalker88? I asked, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. "It's risky," Mikey said, "but we don't have many options. I'll send them a message and see if they respond." We spent some time crafting a careful message. We pretended to be new to the dark web, interested in the creepy stuff they were into. After a day or so, Nightstalker88 replied, "Who are you?" The message read, "Why do you want to meet?" We told them we were curious about their posts and wanted to learn more. After some back and forth, they agreed to set up a meeting in a chat room at a specific time. When the time came, Mikey and I were ready. The chat room was dark, with only a few users. Nightstalker88 showed up and we started chatting. We kept it casual at first, talking about general dark web stuff. Then we brought up Watcher 1987. "So we heard you know Watcher 1987 pretty well," Mikey typed. "We've seen their posts, and they seem interesting." Nightstalker88's response was cautious. "Yeah, we go way back. What do you want with them?" I took a deep breath and typed, "We've seen some of their work, and it's fascinating. We want to know more." There was a long pause. Finally, Nightstalker88 replied, "Watcher 1987 is different. They're into some really dark stuff. If you're serious about meeting them, you need to be careful." We assured Nightstalker88 that we were serious, and after more convincing, they agreed to set up a meeting. They gave us a location, an abandoned building on the edge of town, and a time to be there. The day of the meeting, Mikey and I were both nervous. We drove out to the location, an old creepy warehouse that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The place was creepy as hell, but we had come this far and couldn't back out now. We parked a little distance away and walked to the building. The door was slightly open and we slipped inside. It was dark and dusty, and every sound made us jumpy. After a few minutes, we heard footsteps. A figure emerged from the shadows, wearing a hooded jacket. Their face was hidden. "You must be the new guys," they said in a low voice. "Yeah," Mikey replied. "Are you Nightstalker88? The figure nodded. "Follow me." We followed them through a maze of hallways and rooms. Finally, We entered a room with a single chair and a small table with a laptop on it. The figure gestured for us to sit. "Watcher 1987 will be here soon," they said. "But first, I need to know if you're really serious about this. Once you go down this path, there's no turning back." "We're serious," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to know what Watcher 1987 is all about." The figure nodded and stepped back, disappearing into the shadows. We sat in silence, waiting. After a few minutes, the laptop screen flickered to life. A face appeared on the screen, distorted and hidden by shadows. "Welcome," the distorted voice said. "I hear you're interested in my work." "Yes," Mikey said. "We want to know more about you." The figure on the screen chuckled. "Curiosity is dangerous, but since you've come this far, I'll tell you. I've been watching you, both of you, and I've been waiting for this moment." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about the USB stick. This person knew us, had been following us. "Why?" I asked. "Why have you been watching us?" The figure leaned closer to the camera. "Because you are interesting. Because you are part of a larger experiment, and now you're in too deep to back out." The screen went black and the room plunged into darkness. We sat there, stunned and terrified. We had stepped into a nightmare, and there was no waking up. The truth was out there, and it was darker and more twisted than we could have ever imagined. When we got home, we tried to process what had just happened. "This is messed up," Mikey said, pacing back and forth. "We need to figure out who this person is and why they're doing this." "I know," I replied, feeling overwhelmed. "But where do we start? They could be anyone." "We need to go through everything on that USB stick again," Mikey suggested. "There has to be something we missed." We spent the next few hours going through every photo, video, and document. It was exhausting, but we were determined to find any clue that could lead us to Watcher 1987. Finally, Mikey found something. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a photo. It was a picture of me at a park, taken from a distance. In the background, there was a faint reflection in a window. We zoomed in, and our hearts skipped a beat. The reflection showed a man holding a camera, his face partially visible. "Do you recognize him?" Mikey asked. "I think so," I said, my mind racing. "He looks familiar, but I can't place him." We printed out the photo and took it to my parents' house, hoping they could help. My dad looked at it and went pale. "That's Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice shaking. "He was our neighbor when you were a kid. He moved away suddenly years ago." I felt a chill run down my spine. Mr. Thompson had always been a bit odd, but I never thought much of it. "Do you know where he moved to?" I asked. "No," my dad replied. "He just disappeared one day. We never heard from him again." Mikey and I left my parents' house, more determined than ever to find Mr. Thompson. We spent days tracking down leads, calling old neighbors, and searching online records. Finally, we found an address linked to his name in a nearby town. We drove there, arriving at a rundown house at the edge of town. It looked abandoned, but we decided to check it out. As we approached the front door, we noticed it was slightly open. We pushed it open and stepped inside, the air thick with dust and neglect. The house was filled with old furniture and stacks of boxes. We searched the rooms, looking for any sign of Mr. Thompson. In one of the back rooms, we found a small office with a computer. The screen was dark, but when we moved the mouse, it came to life, displaying a series of folders labeled with dates and names. We opened the most recent folder, and our hearts sank. Inside were photos and videos of me and Mikey, taken over the past few months. There were also detailed notes about our activities, similar to the ones on the USB stick. "This is insane," Mikey said, his voice shaking. "He's been watching us this whole time." Suddenly, we heard a noise from the hallway. We turned to see Mr. Thompson standing there, a twisted smile on his face. "I see you found my little project," he said, his voice cold and detached. We froze, fear paralyzing us. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Because it's fascinating," he replied. "Watching you, documenting your lives, it's like a never-ending story, and now you're part of it forever." Before we could react, he lunged at us. We fought back, adrenaline pumping through our veins. Somehow we managed to overpower him and escape, running to the car and driving away as fast as we could. We went straight to the police, handing over all the evidence we had. Mr. Thompson was arrested and an investigation was launched. It turned out he had been doing this to other people too, stalking them, collecting their photos and videos and creating detailed dossiers on their lives. Even though he was behind bars, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My life had changed forever. The sense of safety and privacy I once had was gone, replaced by a constant feeling of unease. Mikey and I tried to move on, but the trauma was still there. After Mr. Thompson was arrested, Mikey and I tried to go back to our normal lives. It was hard, but we were getting by. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from the police. It was Detective Harris, the guy handling our case. "Hey, I need to let you know something," he said, sounding serious. "Mr. Thompson escaped from custody. We're doing everything we can to find him, but you and Mikey need to be very careful. We think he might come after you." I felt a chill run down my spine. "How did he escape?" "He overpowered a guard during a transfer," Harris explained. "We don't know how he managed it, but he's very dangerous. Please stay alert and call us if you see anything suspicious." After I hung up, I immediately called Mikey. "Dude, Thompson escaped. The cops think he might come after us." Mikey was silent for a moment. "This is bad. We need to be extra careful. Lock all your doors and windows. Keep your phone with you all the time." We both went into full-on panic mode. I checked all the locks in my apartment, installed extra security cameras, and made sure my phone was always charged and nearby. But even with all these precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Days passed, then weeks, and there was no sign of Mr. Thompson. The police were still searching, but they had no leads. Mikey and I tried to stay vigilant, but the constant fear was wearing us down. Every time the phone rang or there was a knock at the door, my heart would race. One night, I was getting ready for bed when my phone buzzed with a notification from one of my security cameras. Someone was at my front door. I froze, heart pounding. I grabbed a baseball bat and slowly approached the door, checking the camera feed on my phone. To my relief, it was just a delivery guy dropping off a package. I sighed and tried to relax, but it reminded me of how on edge I was. I couldn't let my guard down for a second. The next morning, Mikey called me. "I think I saw someone outside my window last night," he said, his voice shaky. "I'm not sure if it was him, but it freaked me out." "Did you call the police?" I asked. "Yeah, they came by but didn't find anything. I'm starting to feel like I'm losing my mind." We both were. The constant stress and fear were taking a toll. I decided to stay over at Mikey's place for a few days so we could watch each other's backs. While at Mikey's, we tried to distract ourselves with movies and games, but the tension was always there. We kept checking the windows, jumping at every little noise. It felt like we were prisoners in our own home. One night, while Mikey was in the shower, I heard a noise outside. I peeked through the blinds and saw a figure standing near the edge of the yard, watching the house. My heart nearly stopped. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator what was happening. The figure moved closer, and I could see it was definitely Mr. Thompson. He had this twisted smile on his face, like he was enjoying the fear he was causing. I banged on the bathroom door, shouting for Mikey to come out. By the time Mikey rushed out, Thompson was gone. The police arrived minutes later, but once again they found nothing. It was like he was toying with us, letting us know he could get to us anytime he wanted. Detective Harris pulled us aside. "We're going to increase patrols in the area and put a unit outside your house. But you guys need to be ready to leave at a moment's notice if we think he's closing in." We nodded, feeling utterly helpless. The police presence was somewhat reassuring, But the fact that Thompson was still out there made it hard to relax. We packed emergency bags and kept them by the door, ready to bolt if things got worse. Over the next few days, the police maintained a constant watch, but Thompson didn't show up again. Mikey and I tried to go about our lives, but it was hard to focus on anything other than the fear. Every night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was out there, planning his next move. Then one evening, while we were eating dinner, the power suddenly went out. We sat in darkness, the silence almost deafening. Mikey grabbed a flashlight, and we cautiously made our way to the fuse box. But before we could get there, we heard a window shatter from the back of the house. Our blood ran cold. Thompson was inside. We didn't have time to think. We bolted for the front door, grabbing our emergency bags and running out into the night. We didn't stop running until we reached the police car parked down the street. The officers quickly took us to a safe house, and we stayed there for what felt like forever. The police launched a massive manhunt, but days turned into weeks with no sign of Thompson. The fear that he could strike at any moment never left us. We were trapped in a cycle of fear and anxiety, knowing that as long as Thompson was out there, we would never be safe. The police kept us updated, but the lack of progress was frustrating. We couldn't live our lives, always looking over our shoulders, waiting for something to happen. One morning, Detective Harris called us to the station. "We have a lead," he said. "There was a sighting of Thompson a few towns over. We're moving you to another safe house just to be sure." We packed up again and moved to the new location. It was more secure, with guards posted outside, but the fear remained. The feeling of being hunted was overwhelming. Every time the phone rang, every knock on the door sent waves of panic through me. Mikey and I spent our days trying to distract ourselves, but it was hard. We talked about everything we had been through, trying to make sense of it all. The fear was always there, though, lurking in the background. Weeks went by with no new developments. The police were still searching, but Thompson seemed to have vanished. The constant state of alert was taking its toll on both of us. Sleep was a distant memory, and even the simplest tasks felt impossible. One night there was a loud knock on the door. My heart raced as I grabbed a bat and Mikey picked up a knife. We cautiously approached the door, ready for the worst. But it was just Detective Harris with some news. "We think we found him," he said. "He was spotted near an old cabin in the woods. We're closing in, but I wanted to let you know so you can be ready to move if needed." We nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. The idea of Thompson being caught was a huge weight off our shoulders, but the thought of him being so close was terrifying. The next few days were tense. The police were on high alert, and we were ready to move at a moment's notice. Then one morning we got the call. "We got him," Harris said. "Thompson is in custody. You're safe now." The relief was overwhelming. We could finally breathe again. But the experience had changed us. The fear, the constant looking over our shoulders, it had left its mark. We knew it would take time to feel normal again, but at least the nightmare was over. Mikey and I spent the next few days trying to adjust to the idea of being safe. It wasn't easy, but we were determined to move on. We had survived something truly terrifying, and we knew we could get through anything as long as we stuck together. Just when Mikey and I thought we could finally relax, something new happened. A few days after Thompson was caught, I got a letter in the mail. There was no return address, and the handwriting looked strange. My heart started racing as I opened it. The letter said, "Thought you could escape? Thompson wasn't working alone. We know where you are. Pay us $10,000, or we'll make your life a living hell. You have 1 week." I showed the letter to Mikey, and we called Detective Harris right away. He told us to come to the station immediately. When we got there, we handed over the letter. Harris read it and got really serious. "This is serious," he said. "But we'll handle it. We'll increase patrols around your safe house and start an investigation to find out who sent this." Mikey and I felt a bit better, but still scared. The idea that someone else was involved was terrifying. It felt like this nightmare would never end. The police said they'd keep us updated, but waiting was hard. Over the next few days, we barely slept. Every noise outside, every knock on the door made us jump. We couldn't stop thinking about the letter and what might happen next. We were constantly looking over our shoulders, worried that someone was watching us. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was Detective Harris. "We've got some good news," he said. "We tracked down the person who sent you that letter. Thompson had a small group of people working with him. They've all been arrested." I felt so relieved. "So, it's over? We're safe now?" "Yes," Harris replied. "We've got everyone involved in custody. You can finally breathe easy." I thanked Harris and hung up, feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I turned to Mikey, who had been waiting anxiously for the news. "They caught them. Everyone who worked with Thompson is behind bars." Mikey let out a deep breath. "Thank God. I don't think I could have handled much more of this." For the first time in weeks, we felt a sense of calm. The constant fear and anxiety began to fade. We knew it would take time to fully recover from everything that had happened, but we finally felt like we could start moving forward. In the following days, Mikey and I began to rebuild our lives. We still checked in with each other frequently, making sure we were both okay. The experience had brought us closer, and we knew we could rely on each other no matter what. The police kept us updated on the case, and it was reassuring to know that Thompson and his accomplices were all in custody. We took comfort in the fact that they would be held accountable for their actions. Slowly but surely, we started to feel normal again. The paranoia began to fade, and we no longer jumped at every little noise. We could finally sleep through the night without waking up in a panic. One evening, as we sat on Mikey's porch watching the sunset, we talked about everything that had happened. "Can you believe it's finally over?" Mikey asked, shaking his head. "I know," I replied. "It's been a crazy ride, but we made it through." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just appreciating the peace and quiet. The fear that had haunted us for so long was finally gone. We knew we still had some healing to do, but for the first time in a long time, we felt truly safe. Life gradually returned to normal. We got back to our routines, went back to work, and started to enjoy the little things again. The shadow of Mr. Thompson and his twisted game had finally been lifted, and we could move forward with our lives. Looking back, it was a terrifying experience, but it also showed us how strong we were. Mikey and I had faced our worst fears and come out the other side. And now, we were ready to put the past behind us and look to the future with hope and confidence. The dark web had shown us its horrors, but we had survived. And in that survival, we found a new appreciation for the simple, everyday moments that make life worth living. Alright, so let me tell you about the most messed up thing that ever happened to me and my friends. It all started when Jake, our tech whiz, stumbled upon this weird ad on the dark web. We'd been playing soccer together since we were kids, and even though we weren't pros, we were pretty damn good. Anyway, Jake found this ad that promised a $50,000 prize for a soccer tournament. It sounded too good to be true, but we were broke, and the thought of that money was just too tempting. Jake showed us the ad one night when we were hanging out at our usual spot, a crummy bar near our neighborhood. The ad was super simple. $50,000 soccer tournament, teams of 5, winner takes all, click for details. We were all like, hell yeah, and decided to go for it. I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? So, we clicked on the link, and it took us to this sketchy website that looked like it was straight out of the 90s. No fancy graphics, just plain text and a button that said register your team. We hesitated for a second because it seemed a bit off, but the money was calling our names. We filled out our team's details and hit submit. Almost immediately, we got an email confirming our registration. It had a location and time for our first match. along with a creepy disclaimer: failure to appear will result in severe consequences. We laughed it off, thinking it was just a scare tactic to make sure people showed up. How wrong we were. The night before the tournament, we met up to talk strategy, but things felt different. There was this weird tension in the air that none of us could shake. Even Jake, usually the jokester, was quieter than usual. We did a round of shots to calm our nerves, but it didn't help much. Something just felt off. The day of the tournament, we drove out to this old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The place looked like it hadn't seen life in years. As we parked and got out, a feeling of dread washed over us. This definitely wasn't a normal soccer field. We walked inside and were greeted by these men in dark suits. Their faces were hidden in the shadows, but their eyes were cold and creepy. One of them introduced himself as Mr. Black and handed us a contract. It was full of legal mumbo-jumbo we couldn't understand, but we signed it anyway. We were already there, and the money was too tempting to walk away from. Mr. Black led us further into the warehouse, where there was a makeshift soccer field marked out on the dusty floor. Our opponents were already there, and they looked just as nervous as we felt. Mr. Black explained the rules. Standard soccer, no fouls, no timeouts. The only weird rule was that the game would go on until one team scored 5 goals. The winner would take home the $50,000. We started playing, and at first it was pretty normal. Both teams were feeling each other out, trying to find weaknesses. But then things started getting weird. The air in the warehouse got heavy, like it was hard to breathe. The shadows seemed to move on their own, and it got colder and colder until we could see our breath. And then we started hearing whispers. At first they were faint, like someone was talking just out of earshot, but they got louder and louder until it was all we could hear. The whispers were in some language we didn't understand, sounding angry and harsh. Suddenly, one of the guys on the other team dropped to his knees, clutching his head and screaming. His teammates tried to help, but he started convulsing, his body twisting in ways that shouldn't be possible. Within minutes, he was dead, his face frozen in a look of pure terror. We wanted to run, but the men in suits blocked the exits. Mr. Black stepped forward and said, "The game must continue. You signed the contract." We were trapped. We had no choice but to keep playing. As we played, the whispers got worse, drilling into our minds. We started seeing things, horrible things, dead bodies, blood, and shadows that seemed to reach out for us. It was like we were in a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. Eventually, we managed to score the final goal. We collapsed in relief, but we didn't feel like winners. Mr. Black came forward, clapping slowly. "Congratulations," he said, his voice icy. "You've won the tournament." He handed us a briefcase full of cash, but it didn't feel real. We just wanted to get out of there. We stumbled out of the warehouse, swearing never to speak of what happened. But the nightmares followed us. We couldn't sleep, and when we did, the whispers were there, haunting us. Then, one by one, my friends started disappearing. First Jake, then Tom. Now it's just me, and I know they're coming for me too. I'm writing this to warn anyone who might be tempted by easy money. Some things aren't worth the cost. Some games should never be played. So after we left that creepy warehouse, we all tried to get back to our normal lives, but it was impossible. Every night I'd lie in bed and see those guys in suits and that dead dude from the other team. And the whispers, man, they were the worst. They were always there, even when I was awake. A week after the tournament, Jake went missing. At first, we thought he just needed some time alone. He had a habit of disappearing for a few days. But after a week, we started to worry. We went to his place and found the door wide open. Inside, everything was a mess, like someone had torn the place apart. There was no sign of Jake, just a creepy note written on the wall in what looked like blood. "The game isn't over." We were freaked out, but what could we do? Calling the cops seemed pointless. What were we going to say? "Hey, we played a soccer game and now our friend's missing?" They'd laugh us out of the station. So we decided to stick together and hope for the best. A few days later, Tom went missing too. We were all hanging out at my place, trying to keep each other sane. Tom went out to grab some beers and never came back. We searched everywhere, but he was gone, just like Jake. We were seriously scared now. After Tom, it was just me, Mike, and Sam left. We were too scared to be alone, so we started staying at the same house, taking turns keeping watch. But even then, the whispers would find us. They'd start soft, like someone talking just out of earshot, then get louder until we couldn't hear anything else. It was like they were inside our heads. One night, it was my turn to keep watch. Mike and Sam were asleep, and I was sitting on the couch trying to stay awake. Then the whispers started again, louder than ever. I looked around, but there was nothing. Suddenly, I saw a shadow move across the room. It was too fast to be a person. I jumped up, but before I could do anything, the lights went out. When the lights came back on, Sam was gone. Mike and I searched the house, but there was no sign of him. It was like he had vanished into thin air. We found another note on Sam's bed. It said, "You can't hide." Mike and I were losing it. We knew we had to do something. We couldn't just wait around to be picked off one by one. We decided to go back to the warehouse. Maybe we'd find some answers there, something to help us understand what was happening. The drive back to the warehouse felt like forever. Mike didn't say a word the whole way, just gripping the steering wheel like his life depended on it. When we got there, the place looked even worse than before. We walked inside, and that same feeling of dread hit us. We searched the whole place but found nothing. No men in suits, no whispers, just silence. Then, in the middle of the empty field, we saw 5 soccer jerseys. Our jerseys. And underneath them was the briefcase with the prize money. We opened the briefcase and it was empty. There was a note inside. It said, "The game never ends." Just then we heard footsteps. We turned around and there they were, the men in suits. Their faces were still hidden in shadows. Mr. Black stepped forward and smiled. "You thought you could escape," he said. "The game is forever. You belong to us now." We tried to run, but it was like running through mud. The whispers were back, louder than ever, and the shadows seemed to reach out and grab us. I don't know how we made it out, but we did. We ran and didn't stop until we were miles away. After that, Mike and I went our separate ways. We didn't talk about what happened, didn't stay in touch. We just tried to move on, but the whispers never left. I still hear them, even now. They're getting louder again, and I know it's only a matter of time before they come for me too. If you're reading this, take my advice and stay away from stuff that seems too good to be true. Anyway, after Mike and I split up, things got worse. I thought maybe the whispers would stop if we weren't together, but I was wrong. They followed me everywhere. I tried to get back to my routine. I went to work, hung out with some other friends, but nothing felt right. I was always on edge, always waiting for something bad to happen. The nightmares got worse too. Every night I'd dream about that warehouse, those men in suits, and that poor guy who died right in front of us. About a month after the warehouse incident, Mike called me. I hadn't heard from him since we split up, and he sounded worse than I felt. He told me he couldn't take it anymore, that the whispers were driving him insane. He was seeing things too, shadows that moved on their own, faces in the dark. He begged me to come over. When I got to Mike's place, he looked terrible. He hadn't slept in days, and he was jumpy, like he was expecting something to jump out at him at any moment. We talked for hours, trying to figure out what to do. We thought about going to the police, but what could we say that didn't make us sound crazy? As we were talking, the whispers started again, louder and more insistent than ever. We both froze, listening. It was like they were right in the room with us. Mike grabbed my arm and whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded, too scared to speak. Then the lights went out. Just like before, we were plunged into darkness, and I could feel Mike's grip on my arm tighten. The whispers were deafening now, and I could see shadows moving all around us. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the front door flew open. We both screamed and ran out of the house, not stopping until we were far away. After that night, I didn't hear from Mike again. I went back to his place a few days later, but it was empty. No sign of him. Just like Jake and Tom and Sam. Another note on the wall, same message. The game isn't over. I was alone now. The whispers were my constant companions, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they came for me too. I started researching anything that might explain what was happening. I spent hours online, looking for stories similar to ours. I found a few, but nothing that really helped. Just more tales of people disappearing, more whispers in the dark. One night I stumbled upon a forum post that caught my eye. It was from someone who claimed to have survived a similar experience. They talked about a secret organization that ran these games, recruiting people through the dark web and using them for some twisted form of entertainment. The poster said the only way to escape was to confront the organization head-on. I didn't have much to lose at this point, so I decided to follow the lead. The post had a location, a remote cabin in the woods where the organization supposedly had a base. It was a long shot, but I had to try. I packed a bag and drove out to the location. The cabin looked abandoned, but I could feel eyes on me as soon as I stepped out of the car. The whispers started up again, louder than ever. I took a deep breath and walked up to the door, knocking hard. To my surprise, the door creaked open. Inside, it was dark and musty, but I could see a faint light coming from a room at the back. I made my way through the cabin, the whispers growing louder with each step. So I walked into that room, and there he was, Mr. Black, sitting at a desk like he was expecting me. He looked up and gave me this creepy smile. "I knew you'd come," he said. His voice was calm, like he was talking about the weather or something. I was scared, but I tried not to show it. "Where are my friends?" I asked. "What do you want from us?" Mr. Black leaned back in his chair, still smiling. "Your friends are gone. They played the game and lost, just like you will." Anger bubbled up inside me. "What is this? Why are you doing this?" He sighed, almost like he was bored. "Entertainment, for those who can afford it. There are people out there who enjoy watching others suffer. It's quite lucrative." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You ruin lives for money? For fun?" "Exactly," he said, nodding. "And you've been quite the entertainer. You've lasted longer than most." The whispers were getting louder, and I could see shadows moving around the room. I knew I had to do something, but I felt frozen. "How do I stop this?" I asked, my voice shaking. Mr. Black's smile disappeared. "You can't. The game never ends. You belong to us now." I couldn't accept that. I wouldn't. I gathered all my courage and lunged at him, knocking him to the floor. We struggled, and I managed to grab a heavy lamp from the desk and smash it over his head. He went limp, and for a moment, the whispers stopped. I searched the room looking for anything that could help. In one of the drawers, I found a stack of files. Each one had a name and a picture, my friends, and many others. There were notes about each of us detailing our every move. At the bottom of the stack, I found my file. Inside, there was a map with several locations marked. One of them was circled in red. I grabbed the map and ran out of the cabin, not stopping until I was back in my car. I didn't know what I'd find at the marked location, but it was my only lead. The whispers started again as I drove, but I tried to ignore them, focusing on the road ahead. After hours of driving, I arrived at an old abandoned factory. The place looked even worse than the warehouse. The windows were broken and the whole building seemed like it was about to fall apart. But I knew I had to go in. I pushed open the rusty door and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and every step echoed through the empty halls. I followed the map, making my way deeper into the building. The whispers grew louder with each step, but I kept going. Finally, I reached a large room at the back of the factory. In the center of the room was a huge cage, and inside were my friends, Jake, Tom, and Sam. They looked terrible, like they hadn't eaten or slept in days. They saw me and started shouting, but I couldn't hear them over the whispers. I ran to the cage and tried to open it, but it was locked. I looked around for something to break the lock and found a heavy piece of metal. I started smashing the lock with all my strength, and after what felt like forever, it finally broke. Jake, Tom, and Sam stumbled out of the cage, looking at me with a mix of relief and fear. "We need to get out of here," I said, and they nodded. As we made our way back through the factory, the whispers grew louder, almost like they were angry. Shadows moved around us, and the temperature dropped. It felt like we were being chased by something we couldn't see. We finally made it out of the factory and into the car. I floored the gas, and we sped away, not looking back. The whispers started to fade, but I knew we weren't safe yet. We drove for hours, trying to put as much distance between us and that place as possible. Eventually, we found a motel and decided to stop for the night. We were exhausted, but none of us could sleep. We kept hearing the whispers, faint but still there, a constant reminder that the game wasn't over. As we sat in the motel room trying to figure out our next move, we knew one thing for sure. We had to find a way to end this once and for all. The game might never end, but we had to fight back. We had to. It was the only way to survive. We sat in that motel room, exhausted and scared. None of us could sleep, so we spent the night talking about what to do next. We knew running wasn't an option. The whispers would always find us, and we couldn't live like that. We had to end this once and for all. The map I found in the cabin had other locations marked. We figured these were more places connected to the game. We decided to check them out, hoping to find something that could help us stop this nightmare. The closest location was another abandoned building, an old hospital about an hour's drive away. Early the next morning, we packed up and headed out. The drive was tense, but we tried to keep each other calm. We talked about normal things like old times to keep our minds off the fear, but deep down we all knew this was it. This was our last shot. When we got to the hospital, it looked just as creepy as the warehouse and the factory. Broken windows, overgrown weeds, and an eerie silence. We walked inside, sticking close together. The whispers started almost immediately, but we tried to ignore them. We explored the hospital, looking for anything that might help. We found old medical equipment, dusty files, and broken furniture, but nothing useful. Just as we were about to give up, Jake found a hidden door behind a large cabinet. It was heavy, but we managed to push it open. Behind the door was a staircase leading down to a basement. The whispers were deafening now, and the air was freezing. We knew whatever we were looking for was down there. We descended the stairs, our flashlights barely cutting through the darkness. At the bottom, we found a large room filled with computer equipment and monitors. It looked like some kind of control center. On the screens, we saw live feeds from hidden cameras. Some were in the factory, some in the warehouse, and some in other places we didn't recognize. They were watching everything. In the middle of the room was a large control panel with a single button marked Terminate. It seemed too good to be true, but we had no other option. We gathered around the panel, our hands shaking. "Are we sure about this?" Tom asked, his voice barely audible over the whispers. "We have to try," I said. "It's our only chance." We all nodded, and Jake reached out to press the button. As soon as he did, the monitors flickered and went dark. The whispers stopped instantly, replaced by an eerie silence. We looked at each other, hardly daring to believe it was over. Suddenly, the room was flooded with light, and a group of men in suits, including Mr. Black, entered. "Well done," Mr. Black said, clapping slowly. "You've completed the game." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "We ended it." Mr. Black smiled that same cold smile. "You may have shut down this operation, but the game never truly ends. There are other locations, other players, but you've earned your freedom, for now." We didn't trust him, but we had no choice. The men escorted us out of the hospital and into the daylight.